So I noticed that in this thing it said one thing, and on the web it said another thing. I don't know if you noticed. So I'm not going to be talking about building chatbots on a supergraph, but I'm gonna introduce a new feature on Apollo platform, which I think is super exciting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today here with you, and it's going to be announced, well, worldwide at the same time. We have this big summit in New York, so it will be announced there too. So it's that kind of timing. So I hope you don't get disappointed that we don't do the chatbot thing. You can always talk to me afterwards and we'll cover that, okay? So just curious, how many of you knows what GraphQL is? How many of you have in some shape or form worked with it? That's good. How many of you know Apollo? Okay. How many of you know Federation? Okay, good. The reason I'm asking is because we're going to talk about simplifying the connectivity to REST services with Apollo. And there are some things that we need to kind of know before we go into that. So just let's say we're going to build an app. We have a client app. It's going to talk to a set of REST APIs. Well, the problem we have, or the challenge we have with REST, is that it can be a bit chatty or not chatty enough, right? It's the problem of over and under fetching. Now, when I call a REST API, either I get too much data or I don't get data enough, so I need to talk to a lot of different endpoints, right? So that kind of drives complexity and kind of slows me down. At the end of the day, it's someone has to take care of the aggregation and the filtering and all of that kind of logic, and that slows down the whole idea of delivery. That's the kind of problem formulation, right? So if we then look at GraphQL and what it kind of solves for, it solves for a lot of different things, but if we look at it, initially, we want to go from over and under fetching to, well, basically query for what we need. So if we need 3 fields, those are the fields we want to query for and get back. We want to connect to one endpoint instead of multiple endpoints for simplicity and for performance. And we want this, I want to emphasize this, we want this place where we can discover the data, not only the entities, but also the relationship between different entities, something we don't get from most of the definitions of REST services. So these are the kind of values that we're after, right? And in order to do that, if we look at what it is, basically it's a schema, and the schema is kind of non-debatable. That is the contract between what is available for the client and what is available from the backend. Basically the thing that sits in between and makes us kind of truly loosely coupled, right? And then there's the query language, and that's how I query my schema. So I get the data back and the data I want. So I can ask for 3 fields, and that's what I want to get back. Then we have the idea of resolvers, and the resolvers are that piece of code that kind of picks up all of this in the background and brings it back to the client in accordance to the schema. And these resolvers needs to run somewhere, so they normally run on a GraphQL server. So that's all awesome, and I'm going to just presuppose that we have the notion of a router here too. The router is responsible for query planning, query execution, some security things, and caching. So that sits in front of your GraphQL servers, right? So we will have the schemas that describes the data, the resolvers that kind of resolves the data, and we have to spin up servers to kind of host this, right? That's how it used to be. So the idea is, what would it be if it wouldn't be like that? If we didn't have to spin up servers, we didn't have to maintain and operate these servers, and we didn't have to write resolver code. That would be pretty awesome, because time to delivery would be shorter if we could just plug in to REST APIs and not bother about these things, right? So today, I'm happy to announce Apollo connectors for REST APIs. Applaud for that. I think that is pretty awesome. It's nice you applaud before I actually explain what it is. But anyway, it's really nice. So the idea is exactly this: bridge the divide between GraphQL and REST, right? And do it with a declarative approach. Let's use the schema. And in the schema, we declare how we want to connect and what we want to connect to. So we'll still keep our schema approach. It will not be that we generate from a database or whatever. We'll still have a schema we'll call a REST service, but we'll just not have to write a resolver for it or spin up a server for it. So no more server to spin up or no more servers to maintain. That's the kind of general idea. So let's take an example. We're at Nordic APIs. There are probably apps like this out there, but live with me for the example. So I want to make a travel companion, which basically talks to, well, airport information and weather information, because I want to make sure that I get back to the Netherlands where I live. I am Swedish, but I live in the Netherlands. I want to go home. I want to know the weather, and I want some flight information, basically. So I figured out I can do this. That's not so hard. And I kind of investigated these different APIs, and I realized I had to do some filtering and stuff in the front end, blah, blah, blah. I didn't want to do that. That kind of annoyed me. So at the end of the day, I really didn't want to write any resolvers, and I didn't want to really spin up any servers for it either. I had a router running, so I will use that one. So the whole idea is that. So my end solution will be this way. I will have my client, I will have a query, I will ask for the data I want, and I will use the connectors to connect to my REST APIs. All make sense? I know we didn't say any questions, so no questions. But if you have any questions afterwards, you just come to me and talk to me. We're out here, okay? Anyway, so just to kind of show that it's real, there's this idea of, it is really as simple as ABC 1, 2, 3, right? And then the devil is in the details, true. But this is as simple as it is as to get up and running, right? So basically, you write your schema, publish your schema, and then you start consuming. So let's just jump into Visual Code for just a second so I can show you how it kind of looks. So do you see this? Yeah, you do. So first of all, there's a couple of new directives. So it's @connect and @source. And the @source, that's where you put in your base URL. You can put in your headers and stuff like that. That's basically what you're going to connect to. And then you have your types. So you go along as you normally would. You describe your data. You describe your types that you want to expose and work with. And then down here is the kind of magic. This is where we kind of configure our connector. So we use the source that we had. Then we have the path. We have some arguments going in here too. And then out of that, we just map that to our types. So this is basically the response we get back, and we map that to our types. And that is basically what it is. After this, we run a command, and this gets then deployed to our router, and then you can start consuming it. And if we would then look at how that would look, basically, this is our Explorer. This is where you can build queries. So this is where I can build a query, and then I can just fire it off to my now GraphQL endpoint instead of having to think about all that filtering and stuff that I had to do if I had the REST endpoints. I don't have to spin up any servers here, and I don't have to write any resolver code. And this will then retrieve the information. And at the end of the day, I can go to my app that I built. I can put in my information, my flight number and stuff, and I will get this back. And honestly, when I started looking at this example, this demo build, me not being a front-end developer, I had to spend some time with React to get that working. But to get these APIs together and mapped and build my query took about 15 to 20 minutes. So to get things up and running, play with, and build, it's fast. So you can iterate and learn. If we look at it, this is what we were talking about. This is what I kind of showed, right? So first, the new directives. Then this is the data source we're going to talk to. Then we do the connection and the mapping. Then we deploy, and then we're happy, and then we're ready to go. Of course, there will be questions around authentication, authorization, all of those other things that are handled by the router, but they are handled by the router like they used to be handled by the router. So that's all the same. And also you can, if you're looking at a federated world, you want these to be part of the entity so you can share them between the different subgraphs. That's also there because it's built on the same kind of, schema, right? With these new directives. And the whole idea is, of course, we can do this without servers, without writing any resolver code, so no need to spin up things and maintain them. Secondly, we can innovate rapidly, get things up there fast and start iterating around it. And it gives you a path forward when you're embarking on your GraphQL journey with a little bit less friction than, and then we have to write resolver code and so on and so forth, right? So that was the whole thing today. This is where you can go to start trying it out. You're probably going to get to a dead link because this is so fresh, so the site is not there yet. I guess the link will be valid this afternoon. So please do pull it down, play around with it. It's in preview. And if there's any questions whatsoever, or you just want to reach out and say hi because you thought I was a pleasant person, this is where you reach me. So that was it. Thank you very much.